Hello everyone. Welcome to our channel of confession and cheating stories. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the bell notification to increase engagement before we get to our video. Let's move on to our video. My marriage to Andre has always been peaceful. There were no big shocks or violent arguments. We had a very normal life, and I believed that stability was what I wanted. We got up at the same time every morning, had breakfast together, and then went to work. In the evening, we would get together on the sofa, watch a movie or TV program, talk about the day, and then go to bed. To be honest, I thought that was enough. They showed love and care, which made them a great partner. Our lives were good. There was nothing missing, but are you aware of the point where you start to wonder if life is really like that? I could admit to others that there was an emptiness inside me, but I couldn't define it. The thing is, once you get used to the routine, you convince yourself that everything is fine. So, I continued to live my life convincing myself that the emptiness was just a temporary phase. In reality, Andre and I were no longer as close as we used to be, even though we lived together. No matter how hard I tried, I could no longer see the passion in them, as they always seemed to be busy with other things. Without realizing it, over time I got used to it. I knew that this was exactly what I wanted, as the routine felt safe and comfortable. I tried to convince myself that this was something that no one wants to admit to being unhappy about. But life can be unexpected, can't it? You believe that nothing will change and that you are safe. And then suddenly something happens. That's exactly what happened to me. Andre and I had a stable marriage, but I wasn't prepared for what was going to happen to me. When Raphael came, everything I knew would change. Everything would finally make sense in the void I had ignored for so long. It all started when Andre's cousin Raphael came there. I knew they were close when they were young, but after college they parted ways. We rarely saw them because Raphael lived so far away, but one day Andre unexpectedly told us that Raphael was coming back to the city and would spend some time with us. They were going through a difficult time and needed a place to make a fresh start. As usual, I nodded. After all, they were Andre's cousins and had fond memories of each other. But Raphael's presence began to have an unexpected effect on me. At first I thought it was just admiration. Andre was unique in many ways. Andre followed all the rules and was very serious. Raphael exuded a lighter, bolder spirit. I tried to get closer, but Raphael's approach seemed to change the atmosphere. When the three of us were together, sometimes I found myself laughing at something Raphael said, and then I felt bad. Why was I listening to them so intently? I don't know exactly when it started to bother me. The way Raphael was looking at me, and the way they started arguing when we were alone, it seemed like there was something special between us that no one else could see. I made an effort to ignore it. After all, they were only relatives of my partner. There was an excitement inside me that I couldn't understand and stress that I couldn't control. The tension was rising. Even though Raphael had no ill intentions and they weren't behaving inappropriately, I could tell there was something strange about the way they looked at me. I found it harder and harder to ignore my feelings. My life was completely turned upside down by this trip. They couldn't make it because of work, and it was planned to be a simple trip to sort out some last-minute family matters. Unexpectedly, they suggested that Raphael and I accompany him. At first, it didn't seem like a problem, but deep down inside, I knew it could be risky to be so close to Raphael. When Andre suggested it, I hesitated. I couldn't refuse, even though I had many ideas, so as not to seem awkward. My motivation was unclear. We only intended to go and return to take care of business, so the trip was short. How easy it seemed, right? The idea of spending so much time with Raphael made me uncomfortable, but I couldn't tell anyone, not even myself. The tension between us grew during the trip. At first, we talked about trivial things and avoided getting personal, but the air between us was thick with things we couldn't say and desires we both tried to hide. Looking at them, I would sometimes realize that they were watching me, and I would pretend that nothing was wrong, when in reality I was having problems with myself. The tension between us grew every second, and the closeness became unbearable. One moment we were laughing, then there was a silence so deep that I could hear my pulse racing. In that solitude, I began to wonder about everything. How had I come to this conclusion? Andre had no difficulty in sending me on this trip with Raphael, because they trusted me so much, even though I was married. Yet, I was experiencing emotions I shouldn't have. Part of me was pulling me towards the unknown, towards something I knew was wrong but felt seductive, while the other part of me wanted to escape and take control. My thoughts were jumbled as I drove along the deserted roads. I was sure that something was going to change as a result of this adventure. I could feel it, and the scariest thing was that deep down I didn't want to stop it. It all happened on a cold night in the middle of the journey. I was staying in a simple motel and would travel again the next day. Although I did my best to sleep, as I lay in my bed, Raphael was constantly on my mind. The tension between us had reached an unbearable level, with my pulse racing every time they approached, and the silence in Raphael's room made me feel more uneasy than I should have. They seemed to be waiting there, and I knew I could go down the hall if I wanted to. All I had to do was walk through. I made an effort to ignore it. In fact, despite my best efforts, I had given up long before anything happened. Just then there was a knock on the door. For a moment, my heart stopped. I was sure it was them. Without thinking, I stood up, my mind unable to stop my body from moving. When I opened the door, Raphael was there. There was a mixture of doubt and longing in his eyes. Neither I nor they needed to say anything. The space that had been between us for days had suddenly disappeared. They entered the room, and without a word, it was over. The touching, the kissing, everything felt horrible and inevitable at the same time. But at the time, I couldn't think about the repercussions for Andre, for my marriage. That evening, it seemed like it was just Raphael and me in the room. After everything, there was a heavy silence between us. I knew I had gone too far, and although the guilt started to kick in immediately, the longing lingered. I left the room quietly, leaving behind a trail of confusion and sadness. I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling, wondering how I had ended up like this. However, no matter how bad I felt, part of me didn't want this to be the last time. I remembered what had happened the previous evening. What was I going to do now that they had cheated on me? I almost didn't recognize myself when I looked in the mirror. We hardly looked at each other at breakfast. The atmosphere between us was very different. It was almost unbearable now. There used to be a lot of glances and grins, and the tension that used to be there was now sinking in with stillness and sadness. Even though what we were doing was horrible, I was scared, because deep down I knew I still wanted them. One of the hardest things I've ever done in my life was going home. Andre was there, completely unaware of what had happened, his typical smile on our face. They asked me how the trip was, and hugged me. I tried to pretend that nothing had changed, but I still smiled back. Only now, everything was different. I tried to tell myself that I should be normal, but I wasn't the same person anymore, and every time Andre looked at me, I felt sick to my stomach. I was fighting an internal battle between my guilt and my desire to know what really happened. I was being dragged into an uncontrollable mess. At times I thought about telling Andre everything. Maybe they would forgive me, and maybe we could work it out together. But the idea of them knowing what I had done to them and suffering was unbearable. So silence became my refuge. I kept it a secret, as if my life depended on it. Day after day, it seemed that what had happened between us would never end. Despite my best efforts to stay away from them and forget what had happened, Raphael made things difficult. Andre took advantage of their absence at every opportunity. They would push me away and glare at me or say something in whispers, making the situation even more tense. As much as I wanted to put an end to it all, my attraction to Raphael got in the way. Despite my guilt, Raphael's influence over me was unquestionable. Raphael wanted to continue the conversation that had started between us. Even though I knew it was wrong, I slowly gave in to his demands for more dates and time alone. As soon as Andre left for work, Raphael found a way to approach me. They touched my arm longer than necessary, and their eyes spoke to me without words. They chose the appropriate words and said them, words that shattered my logic even as I tried to escape. Raphael gave me a look, and I secretly hoped they wouldn't let go. I was in a risky game, trying to find a balance between my marriage to Andre and my growing feelings for Raphael. I felt like I had two lives, and they were starting to clash. Raphael wanted more, and if I gave in to his demands, things would get out of control. But the truth was, at that very moment, I didn't know how to let go. Andre started to notice that something was wrong, despite my best efforts to hide everything and pretend that everything was normal. At first, he would comment on the little things he saw, grinning constantly in that worried way that made me feel guilty, and telling me that I was just tired and that everything was fine. Raphael and I were getting closer, and I could feel their uneasiness growing as things got worse. Andre's questions increased in frequency and depth every time we spent a lot of time with Raphael or were alone. They tried to hide their suspicions by asking Raphael if he had been talking a lot lately. I responded immediately and naturally, without showing my fear. I tried to pretend that nothing was wrong, but deep inside I knew that Andre was beginning to understand something. There were moments when I thought about their thoughts. I wondered if they had any physical suspicions, and I was overwhelmed by a growing sense of fall and shame. The worst thing was that I kept seeing Raphael even though I knew Andre was a suspect. We were getting more and more tense, and I felt like I was walking into a trap. It was certain that sooner or later Andre would find out the truth. But I was also aware of what was going on between Raphael and I. I knew they were becoming more suspicious, but I was trying. The worst thing was that with every question they asked, they were getting closer to exposing me. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. Even though there was no physical fight, I could tell by the look in Andre's eyes that they understood the truth. They didn't have to tell me openly. Because of the weight of the air between us, everything was out in the open. This was the result of my actions and feelings that I had been trying to hide for so long. Now, I was about to make a difficult decision. "You've changed," Andre said. There was a melancholy in his voice that broke my heart. My throat tightened, and all I could do was think about how I had gotten to this point. They knew me well enough to know what I was trying to hide, and that's when I realized I couldn't go on living with this deception. But Raphael didn't seem ready to give up so quickly. They kept calling me. They wanted to know what I was going to do next. Here was the man I had forgotten, and the man I had built my life with. I found myself torn between the person who made me realize how I felt and the person I had ignored. I had to decide what to do. My marriage, which I still cherished despite everything, would be completely destroyed if I continued with Raphael. I knew that if I went on with Raphael, it would destroy everything that Andre and I had left. Even though I felt terrible, I didn't want to ruin everything Andre and I had worked so hard to achieve. He was my life partner, not just my husband. I knew I would never be able to forgive myself if I completely severed that bond. I made the decision right then and there to go undercover. It was time to break up and end the relationship before things became irreparable. I spoke to Raphael on the phone and informed him that we had reached our breaking point. The conversation was difficult, tense, and full of pent-up emotions. Even though Raphael wasn't happy, I believe they knew in their hearts that this was the end. No matter how bad things got, we couldn't go on without hurting those around us more. We both knew it would be hard to go back to Andre. There was mistrust and a wound between us. I was ready to try, even though I knew it would take time and might not even heal completely. I decided to fight for my marriage and for Andre. I decided to stand up for the one person who had supported me through all my mistakes. I finally decided to give up what seemed exciting and risky because deep down I knew I was trying to protect the most important thing. All I knew was that this was my only chance to keep my life together, even though I wasn't sure if Andre would forgive me completely or if we could repair what had been damaged. This is the end of our story of infidelity. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and enable the bell notification to get our stories before anyone else. See you in our next cheating story. Goodbye.